Hello everyone. Hi. So welcome to another session. And here with me is Ananya.
Hello everyone.
So Ananya, what are we doing today?
We will be doing AP set and this is day 7 of our practice. So let's get started.
Okay, yeah. So I will share my screen. Okay. So I think all of you can see the screen clearly. Right. Okay, so let's get started. It is day 7 of AP set crash course. So there are 6 videos prior to this. If you haven't watched those yet, please do. They will really help you with your last moment revision before the exam. Okay. Here is our first question.
Which of the following works by Samuel Beckett is not a drama? Is it Krapp's Last Tape, Malone Dies, Waiting for Godot, or Endgame? You have to tell which is not a drama by Samuel Beckett from his works.
Okay. So here you can see Krapp's Last Tape, Waiting for Godot, Endgame. All these are dramatic works by Beckett, but Malone Dies is not a work of drama. It's a novel. And this work belongs to his trilogy. Molloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable. This forms the trilogy. So Malone Dies, it's a novel by Beckett. It was first published in 1951 in French. And later it was translated into English by Beckett himself. And Malone Dies, there is this novel, contains the famous line, "Nothing is more real than nothing." It's a metatextual echo of Democritus, the philosopher, who said naught is more real than nothing. And we can also find the reference of this line in the debut novel of Beckett, that is Murphy. And Molloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable. These 3 novels form a trilogy. These are novels. They are not works of drama. All right? Okay. Let's move on to our next question. Yes.
Science and Poetry is a work by Dash. Is it I.A. Richards, Kenneth Brooks, Robert Penn Warren, or J.C. Ransom? Science and Poetry. It's a work by either of the following writers.
Okay. So, Science and Poetry, it's a very popular work of criticism by the practical critic I.A. Richards. He also wrote works like Principles of Literary Criticism. So, he was a practical critic who believed in the autonomy of the text and they preferred close reading. They were not really concerned about the biography of the author or the historical conditions in which a particular text was produced, but they were mostly concerned about the close reading of the text. They believed in the autonomy of a particular text. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
The Shock of Arrival. Reflections on Post-Colonial Experience is a work by Dash. Is it Meena Alexander, Meenakshi Mukherjee, Urvashi Butalia, or Sara Ahmed? The Shock of Arrival, Reflections on Post-Colonial Experience. This is a work by either of the following writers.
So, The Shock of Arrival, Reflections on Post-Colonial Experience. It's a very popular work by Meena Alexander. So, in this book, acclaimed Asian American poet and novelist Meena Alexander unleashes a fury of prose and poetry to confront the stereotypes and explore the challenges facing post colonial immigrants in America. Commenting on the history of memory, language, shame, and exile, Alexander poignantly describes the wealth of experiences and imaginings that have shaped her life and writing. And even her memoir, Fault Lines, very prominently talk about her experiences of exile. And she talks about specifically about the exile, not only of her body, but also the exile of herself. and her immigrant experiences in America. Okay, so very important work. Remember, The Shock of Arrival, Reflections on Post-Colonial Experience by Mina Alexander. Okay, next question. Yeah.
River Sutra is a novel by Dash. Is it Kiran Desai, Geeta Mehta, Jhumpa Lahiri, or Nayantara Sehgal? Novel's name is River Sutra. You have to tell which of the following writers has written it.
So River Sutra, it's actually a collection of short stories which came out in a novel form, and it's a work by Geeta Mehta. And the book's stories are interconnected by both a geographical reference and by the theme of diversity within Indian society, both present and past. Unlike some of Mehta's previous stories, the ones in A River Sutra feature only Indian characters. So please remember, in River Sutra by Geeta Mehta, there are only Indian characters. And it's actually a collection of short stories which came out in novel form. Okay, next.
Night Runners of Bengal is a novel by Dash. Is it by Lawrence Durrell, John Masters, J. G. Farrell, or none of the above? Night Runners of Bengal. This is the novel. It's by either of the following writers.
So, Night Runners of Bengal was the debut novel of John Masters. It is a work of historical fiction set against the backdrop of the Indian Rebellion of 1857. This work was published in 1951 in UK, and in the United States it was published also in 1951 by the Viking Press. So please remember two very important facts. It was the debut novel of John Masters, and this novel is set against the backdrop of the Indian Rebellion of 1857. There is a Sepoy Mutiny, or as we call it, the first War of Independence of India. Okay, next. Yeah.
The Bell Stratagem is a romantic comedy of manners by Dash. Is it Hannah More, Hannah Cowley, Fanny Burney, or Hester Trail? The Bell Stratagem, it is a romantic comedy of manners by either of the following writers.
So The Bell's Stratagem is a romantic comedy of manners by Hannah Cowley. It received its premiere on 22nd February 1780. The play became a major hit of the season, with Queen Charlotte enjoying it so much that she decreed it to be performed for the royal family once a season for several years. And its title, The Bell's Stratagem, comes from George Farquhar's play, The Bew's Stratagem. Okay? The Bew's Stratagem by George Farquhar and The Bell's Stratagem by Hannah Cowley. And it's a romantic comedy of manners of the 18th century. Okay? Because it was premiered in 1780. Right. Let's move on to the next question.
The Broken Heart is a tragedy by Dash. Is it John Ford, John Webster, Ben Jonson, or Thomas Middleton? The Broken Heart, this is the tragedy's name, and it's by either of the following writers.
Okay. So The Broken Tragedy, sorry, The Broken Heart. The Broken Heart is a Caroline era tragedy by John Ford, and it was published in 1663. The play has long vied with Ford's play This Pity She's a War, and the date of the play's authorship is uncertain. But the title page of the first edition states that the play was acted by the King's Men at the Blackfriars Theatre. The text is preceded by the motto, Fide Honor, an anagram for John Ford, which Ford employs in other of his plays as well. And this volume was dedicated to William Lord Craven, Baron of Hampstead Marshall. So The Broken Heart. The Broken Heart is a Caroline era tragedy by John Ford. Okay.
Dash was the debut novel of Iris Murdoch. Is it Under the Net, The Sea, The Black Prince, or The Bell? I have to tell the debut novel of Iris Murdoch.
So it was Under the Net. It was published in 1954. and it was the first published novel of Iris Murdoch. Set in London, it is the story of a struggling young writer, Jake Donoghu. Its mixture of the philosophical and the picaresque has made it one of Murdoch's most popular novels. Under the Net, 1954, the debut novel of Murdoch. Okay. Next.
Parda is a poem by Dash. Is it Anne Sexton, Kamla Das, Sylvia Plath, or Eunice D'Souza? Parda is a poem by either of the following female writers.
So, it's a very popular poem by the American poet Sylvia Plath. And the overall theme of this poem is that it offers a complex and multifaceted portrayal of a woman living in seclusion. Here, parda symbolizes or it alludes to seclusion. Okay? Parda is also a very famous poem by the poet Imtiaz Dharkar. So you should also know that Parda, it's a poem not only by Sylvia Plath, but it's also a poem by Imtiaz Dharkar. She's also an American poet, a very prominent voice of the contemporary times. So do also look up Imtiaz Dharkar. Okay, so before we proceed, I would just like to remind you all that at Vallat, from 28th April onwards, we will have a certificate course on digital humanities by Professor Ashijit Datta. He is an assistant professor at SRM University of Andhra Pradesh. And here we will talk about this idea that decoding the digital human in digital humanities. And you can see that the topics which will be covered in this lecture series are also given. The fee is only rupees 1,000, and the phone number where you can contact further is also there on the poster. So you can contact there and get enrolled accordingly. Okay, next.
The Functions of a Teacher is an essay by Dash. Is it Walter Besant, Bertrand Russell, F.R. Lewis, or Stanley Fish? The Functions of a Teacher, this is the essay's name. It's by either of the following writers.
So the Functions of a Teacher, it's quite a popular essay by Bertrand Russell. Okay, and according to Russell, it is the business of a teacher to instill what he can of knowledge and reasonableness into the process of forming public opinion. Thus, Russell assigns a very weighty role to the teacher. Russell points out that organized party spirit is one of the greatest dangers of our time. And this idea of that it is the responsibility of the teachers that how they should participate in the formation of public opinions. It is one of the most crucial ideas of this essay. The Functions of a Teacher is an essay by Bertrand Russell. Okay. Next.
Which of the following novels of Amitav Ghosh is concerned with the relationship between science, history, and colonialism in a futuristic detective story? Is it The Shadow Lines, The Circle of Reason, In an Antique Land, or The Calcutta Chromosome?
Okay. So it is The Calcutta Chromosome. Okay. So The Calcutta Chromosome is a 1995 novel by Amitav Ghosh, and the book set in Calcutta and New York City at some unspecified time in the future is a medical thriller that dramatizes the adventures of people who are brought together by a mysterious turn of events. The book is loosely based on the life and times of Sir Ronald Ross, the Nobel Prize winning scientist who achieved a breakthrough in malaria research in 1898. The novel was the recipient of the Arthur C. Clarke Award in 1997. So again, Amitav Ghosh is one of the most important novelists of the contemporary times. Questions from him can come from any of his works, his novels, his works of non-fiction. So please do look up his works very thoroughly. Okay, right, next.
Eliza Ann Fraser was a Scottish woman who was aboard a ship that wrecked at an island off the coast of Queensland, Australia on 22 May 1836, and who was taken by the Badjala people. Which novel by Patrick White adapts her story? Is it Memoirs of Many in One, A Fringe of Leaves, Eye of the Storm, or The Ant Story? The Ant Story. Eliza Ann Fraser. This is the woman whose story Patrick White adapts. So you have to tell which novel is it.
It is A Fringe of Leaves by Patrick White. So Patrick White is an Australian novelist. So it is A Fringe of Leaves. It is the 10th novel of Patrick White. And what is this novel about? It is about a young Cornish woman, Ellen Rosberg. So here Eliza has been named as Ellen Rosberg, who travels to the Australian colony of Van Diemen's Land in the early 1830s with her older husband Austin to visit his brother Garney Rosberg. After witnessing the brutalities of Van Diemen's Land, the Rosbergs embark on their return trip to England on the Bristol Maid, the ship. But the ship runs aground on the coral reef of the coast of what is New Queensland. Ellen is the only survivor from the leaky vessel in which the passengers and crew travel to the shore. She is rescued by the Aboriginal people of the island, and she later meets Jack Chance, a convict who has escaped from Moreton Bay, the brutal penal settlement to the south. And this novel talks about adventures. So this story of Eliza, the Scottish woman who was aboard a ship that wrecked at an island off the coast of Queensland, Australia. So this story has been adapted by Patrick White in his novel A Fringe of Leaves. And here the name of the character or the protagonist is Ellen Roxburgh. Okay, next.
Ecology and the Politics of Survival is a work by Dash. Is it Ritu Menon, Vandana Shiva, Urvashi Batalia, or Rita Kothari? Ecology and the Politics of Survival. This is the work's name. You have to tell which author has written it.
So, Ecology and the Politics of Survival. It's a very popular work by the Indian activist Vandana Shiva. You all might have already heard about her and her works. So, Ecology and the Politics of Survival: Conflicts over Natural Resources in India. It's a very popular work by the Indian activist and writer Vandana Shiva. Okay. Her another very important work is Staying Alive. So do look up her works. And also do look up Ritu Menon, Urvashi Butalia, Rita Kothari. They're also very famous writers and critics. So do look up their works. Next.
Robert Creeley, the poet, belongs to which movement among the following? Is it Transcendentalism, Black Mountain Poetry, Beat Poetry, or Movement Poetry? Robert Creeley is the poet who belonged to which movement among the following?
So he belonged to the group of Black Mountain Poetry. So the Black Mountain poets, sometimes called projectivist poets, they were a group of mid-20th century American avant-garde or postmodern poets centered in Black Mountain College in North Carolina. And Robert Creeley belonged to this group. There are many other poets who belong to this group, and Robert Creeley was one of them. So this literary movement, traditionally described as the Black Mountain Poets, centered around Charles Olson, who became a teacher at the college in 1948, and Robert Creeley, who worked as a teacher and editor of the Black Mountain Review for 2 years, is considered to be another major figure of this group. Okay, next.
Realism and Reality. The Novel and Society in India is a work by Dash. Is it Meenakshi Mukherjee, Rajeshwari Sundar Rajan, Meena Alexander, or Sara Soleri? Realism and Reality, The Novel and Society in India. This is the work. You have to tell which author is it.
So Realism and Reality, the Novel and Society in India. It's a very powerful critical work by Meenakshi Mukherjee. Another work of Meenakshi Mukherjee you all should know is The Perishable Empire. The Perishable Empire by Meenakshi Mukherjee. is also very important. And in this work, Realism and Reality, the novel and the society, it is a very insightful commentary upon the Indian regional novel. And further, this book suggests a methodology for examining the means by which other derivative literatures within the colonized world reconciled the demands of Western realism with the representation of indigenous realities. So, please do look up these critical works by various critiques of India or the diasporic critiques. So, Realism and Reality, the Novel and Society, it's by Meenakshi Mukherjee. Okay.
Sir Guyon represents dash in Spenser's The Fairy Queen. You have to tell, is it temperance, chastity, religion, or justice? Sir Guyon represents something in Spenser's The Fairy Queen. You have to tell which option is it.
So, Sir Gayan is the protagonist of the book 2 of the Fairy Queen, and he's a brave knight who embodies the virtue of temperance. Sir Gayan embodies the virtue of temperance, and Britomart represents chastity, and Artegall represents justice. And here, Sir Gayan represents temperance in Spenser's The Fairy Queen. Okay. So before we wrap up, I would just like to remind you all again that at Vallat, from 28th April onwards, we are starting a certificate course on digital humanities by Professor Ashijit Datta. He is an assistant professor of the Department of Liberal Arts at SRM University, Andhra Pradesh. And so we will be talking about decoding the digital human in digital humanities. The fee will be only rupees 1,000, and you can see the phone number on the screen where you can contact further and address your queries there and get enrolled accordingly. All right, so that's all for tonight. Okay, so Ananya, shall we wrap up?
Yes, good night, everyone.
Yes, so good night, take care, and we will see you again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Please join us tomorrow as well. Till then,